The last few days, couple of weeks actually, have been very eventful, and I didn't have time because I was involved with uni. Didn't have time to make videos putting out my perspective on stuff. So I have quite a number of topics to cover, and I don't want to make separate videos, so I'm just gonna make a long one covering everything. And to make easier for you guys, I'm pinning a comment with the timestamps where I cover different topics, so you can either skip things you're not interested about, or you can watch the video in a different order, or you can watch some of the video now, finish later, whatever. I'm just gonna put it out, put in that comment to make it easier to navigate through this video, because this is probably going to be a pretty long video. The first topic that I'm covering is the Kerfuffle in the Non Sequitur Show. I think it would be interesting to put my perspective on that. The second one is my participation in the Non Sequitur Show about 2 weeks ago, doing sort of a review of how things went and my performance on that. Yeah, that eventually actually ended up being a debate. It was not the idea, but it became a debate. And the third topic that I'm covering is Rationality Rules' new video on trans athletes, but not so much, but more my kerfuffle, that I was involved mostly with curiosity on Twitter. So I think most of you who are watching this video are aware of what happened. There was a falling out between the two founders of the channel, Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis, where basically Kyle officially took over the channel, and Steve decided to protest about this, as he was the actual founder of the channel, the person who started the channel. I'm not sure if he was the person who named the channel the Non Sequitur Show. I think he is, but I am not completely sure on that. And the fact that Kyle over time took control of the channel and is now basically kicking Steve out, and something that, in my opinion and in the opinion of the majority of the community, is of course absolutely dishonest and probably illegal. I'm not sure about the legality of it, but it's certainly dishonest, it's certainly unethical, and there is, I think, no way to excuse what Kyle Curtis did on this matter. The best comparison here that we can make is with The Simpsons, because there was something similar between Sam Simon and Matt Groening during the early years of The Simpsons. For those who don't know the history of The Simpsons, it was created by Matt Groening as small, short cartoons during the Tracy Ullman shows in the late 80s. Groening created the characters, gave them the personality traits that they have, but it wasn't a TV show. It was just some very short cartoons. Two TV producers, Sam Simon and James L. Brooks, approached Groening with the idea to create a TV show based on his characters, and that's how The Simpsons was born. Now, they all started with the show, started with the first season, and slowly the relationship, especially between Simon and Groening, started to become a bit problematic. Simon was a guy with a very strong personality, and to his own admission, someone sometimes a little bit difficult to work with. In some ways, making a comparison here, you could say that Sam Simon was Steve McRae in this relationship. Someone who is not always loved by his peers. But he was a brilliant writer. In fact, he was the main creative force in The Simpsons, in the show The Simpsons. He was the main writer in the beginning of the show, and he was in The Simpsons. One of the reasons why The Simpsons is such a successful show is Sam Simon. He was perhaps the major creative force of the early years of The Simpsons. when his relationship with Groening became a problem, and eventually they had a falling out, and after the 4th season, Sam Simon left the show forever. One of the main reasons that led Simon and Groening to fight was the fight over who created The Simpsons. Now, there is no question that Groening created the characters, which, still making the comparison here, I think there is no question that Steve McRae created the channel Non Sequitur Show. But who developed the characters, who developed the show, who developed The Simpsons, and who developed the Non Sequitur Show were both of them. In the case of The Simpsons, there was a third person involved, and with the Non Sequitur Show, you can also say there is a third person involved, as Bullinator had a role in this. And in The Simpsons, what happened is every Simpson episode, Groening is credited as the creator, but the 3 producers, Groening, Simon, and Brooks, are credited as the developers of the show. That is something that is done in perpetuity, because you cannot change the fact that the 3 of them were involved in developing The Simpsons as it is. That cannot be changed. And in this case, what happened is after Simon left the show, became no longer involved with The Simpsons, he was still part of the legacy. Now his name is listed as a developer, and it will be listed to every Simpson episode ever made. And he died a few years ago, so his heirs are still making money out of The Simpsons, because it is deserved. He was one of the people who created The Simpsons as we know it. He didn't invent the characters, but he invented the show. He helped developing the show to become what it is. The 3 of them. So the 3 of them are credited. And I think here is where the analogy can very much be applied. Steve McRae, Kyle Curtis, and Bullinator as well, the 3 of them developed the Non Sequitur Show to become what it is. Now, as the same happened with The Simpsons, one person became more involved and kind of took creative control and started to call the show his baby. That's, in the case of The Simpsons, was what Matt Groening did. He kind of started promoting himself as the only creator and original creator of which original creator he is, but as the only creator of The Simpsons, when of course it isn't the case. And here we have Kyle promoting himself as the creator of the Non Sequitur Show, or at least claiming that the show is where it is because of him, and not all of the other 2 people involved. So that is what I think pissed people off the most, because he's just taking credit for something that he didn't do alone.
95% of what went into this channel was done by me. Non Sequitur in every aspect is me.
He was part of it, and there is no question about it, but he wasn't the only one. The brand was created by the 3 of them. And even if Steve or Bullinator are no longer part of the show, they still should get their share for anything related to the Non Sequitur Show, because the 3 developed the Non Sequitur Show. That cannot be changed. That credit is due in perpetuity. You cannot change that. Whatever percentage from now on is of course discussed, is a matter to be discussed. Certainly they still deserve it. Not only credit, they deserve money from it. And apparently Kyle was not interested, and is not interested in that at all. And I think that is just unethical.
We can keep the 4 days a week with you. You can get the 50% for the days that you're on the show going forward. And
no,
I'm fine with that.
No.
So there isn't here any way, honestly, that Kyle can justify what he did. And that's why the community is being so harsh on him. Because he's simply wrong. And I actually don't even know that he realizes how wrong he is. And in fact, when he goes on camera trying to justify his actions, he's really doing a disservice to himself and a disservice to his channel. When he goes on and says shit like this
was not a 50-50 partnership. There was no sort of agreement that way.
when people know that that is not true.
Was that the original agreement? Yes, or no?
What? 50%?
Was
50%?
Yes, we've got it in
that's
writing.
that thing. What
It doesn't make him look good. When he also says things like this,
It was just sort of a dirty move on his part to record that, put it out there without my knowing.
I recorded all this, Kyle. I think you need, you know, and I'm going to play
Good.
this. Good.
Steve,
Reg,
Steve,
take
play
off.
it.
makes him look guilty as fuck.
Let me
Sue
answer
me.
that question.
And that footage, the leaked footage that he's referring here, it's pretty damning. It doesn't help him at all. And the fact that he's saying that if he wasn't being recorded, he would act differently.
For a lot of things, you know, you wouldn't say on stream.
That doesn't help him. That just makes him look more shady. Like he's not thinking when he's saying this stuff.
I didn't say anything in that stream that I regret saying. Non sequitur in every aspect is me.
So I think the best thing for Kyle right now is to just step backwards, let other people take charge of the Non Sequitur Show for now, have other people hosting, and he shouldn't be on camera for a while because it's not helping, it's not making him look good. I actually don't know Kyle personally, I've never spoke to him, but apparently he does have some health issues. And having to deal with the court of public opinion that is extremely harsh, and personal issues like health issues, that's some pretty serious shit, to be honest. And the best thing for him would be to just step backwards, like step away. Don't expose himself like this, because people can be very, very cruel. And just deal with his personal stuff. Take the time off, deal with his personal shit, let other people handle the channel, which was suggested to him. That Steve was happy to do that, Reg's Rhetoric was happy to do that, and he rejected it. So I think he definitely, there's no reason why he would change now, but that is the best way, the best course of action to Kyle here. Going on camera trying to justify himself doesn't make him look good, it makes him look worse. And in fact, I have unsubscribed from the Non Sequitur channel because I do not support what he did, and I think no one in their right mind supports what he did. It was just wrong, and whether you like or hate Steve, it's irrelevant. It's just, Kyle is just fucking wrong. It was extremely unethical. And that's why I unsubscribed from the Non Sequitur Show, and if I am ever invited to go again, I will not go again to the Non Sequitur Show. The only way I can change my mind about this is if Kyle says there is another story, another side to the story. If he can convince me that I am looking at this in a very wrong way, but with the information that I know of, that people know of, that has been made public, there is nothing so far that he has said that has convinced me that what he did wasn't completely unethical and just completely wrong. I was invited to have a discussion regarding allyship with the trans community. The show was hosted by Shannon Q and Aaron Ra. It eventually became a debate. It wasn't supposed to be a debate. It was supposed to be a conversation about allyship, and it became a debate about gender and sex and what does those things mean, what do those things entail. I think I did on a debate. Mostly was a debate with Kalon, who is the kind of person who believes everything is a social construct, or the sex and gender are social constructs. She used the word arbitrary a couple of times during the discussion. And of course, that became a point of contention. Facial hair is a typically male characteristic. It doesn't mean that females cannot have facial hair, but it's typically male. Males have typically
Yeah, and that's arbitrary.
upper body.
That has nothing
It's
to do
not
with gender.
arbitrary because it's not arbitrary because it's from observable patterns in nature. That's not arbitrary.
No,
it's based on
that's
observation.
not how.
It's based
It's
on
real-
observation
so,
of reality. I think I did well on that debate. I think I was able to express most of my my arguments, even though since it wasn't supposed to be a debate, I of course didn't have any sources to reference or anything like that, because of course I wasn't there to have a formal debate with any about this stuff. So just putting out my knowledge, which of course is knowledge that I acquired over time studying this shit, and I was not just simply talking out of my ass. So even I've left a comment in that video, so to back one of my claims that I did about how science, about the metrics used in science aren't arbitrary. The same way that how we create concept of sex in biology is not arbitrary. And I was glad that Aaron Rao was there so he could help me out on that stuff.
If it's arbitrary, it means it's up to human whim. All right, so we can either classify things by derived synapomorphies, or we can classify things by what color they are. But if I classify living organisms by what color they are, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to build a tree out of that. There's nothing that will make sense. So my arbitrary decision can be proven wrong by classification by other methods, and so that then it is not arbitrary because it's not up to human whim.
Now, one of the things that people complain about was the constant interruptions during that debate.
Whoo! Okay, everybody take a drink. I'll take a drink.
People on the show can literally not distinguish anything
Nobody-
you are saying. Nobody
knows what
understood a
anybody-
single thing you just said because you were talking over each
Okay.
One of the things that people don't know is that there is a lot of lag in the sound in those conversations. So sometimes they'll have a lot of people talking over one another because of that. Because there is, a little bit of silence. You start talking, and you have two people started talking at the same time, and they start talking on top of each other. That happens, and sometimes it's not people being rude or just trying to talk over one another. That doesn't mean, of course, that there were instances where people were interrupting each other. I was guilty of that a couple of times. I don't think I was nearly as guilty as Kalen, who was not only interrupting myself, but were interrupting others. That is something that makes made the whole thing a little bit difficult, as some of my points I was not able to express as well as I wanted to. But I think the whole thing regarding gender, that is not arbitrary, it's not random, that there are things, how we create these concepts of masculinity, femininity, or male, female in the case of sex classifications, they aren't arbitrary. They are from observable patterns in nature. And this is something that I believe I was able to express clearly, and it was actually my main point during that whole conversation. So I think I did pretty well there in that sense. And it was, of course, very interesting to get to know May and Jenny. They have their own YouTube channel. I'm putting a link to that channel in the description. I will be happy to join them in another conversation in the future. And because it was pretty interesting what they had to say. Especially May made some pretty good contributions in that conversation.
Arguing that this is a social construct in the way that Kellen is really pointless, because using this definition of social construct, literally everything is a social construct, including the shape of the earth. it's a pointless discussion to go down, because
Yeah, I agree.
it's a pointless discussion to go down, because everything is a social construct if it's some knowledge that we have.
You say there's no utility in calling everything a social structure, yet you interact with the world via a social structure called language.
Now, regarding rationality rules, he finally put out his video on transgender athletes. Definitely didn't back down from his original video, but he certainly made a much better argument. In fact, I think it's the best video now on the internet about this topic, as his research was pretty good. And I was actually impressed with the quality of the video. It was excellent. So I think now probably his best video to date, to be honest. And in no way you could say that his video was transphobic. Seriously, there is nothing at all transphobic about the video. And his conclusion is where he differed the most from his first video. And he actually reached exactly the same conclusion that I have on this topic. In the case of trans people, of a trans woman who transition after puberty and has some unfair advantage to cisgender females, it wouldn't be fair to allow her to compete. She shouldn't be able to compete if she has an unfair advantage. Now, what that would mean, if that means that she'll have to compete with males, that means there will have to be another category, that means we should have mixed categories. I don't know. That is another thing. That is another discussion. That is important also to have, but that is not what Rationality Rules was talking about in his video. He was making the argument that some people, some MTF transgender athletes have some unfair advantage. Now, I believe that is the case. That is the case because in some sports, just body shape alone can be an unfair advantage in the case of a comparison between a male and a female skeleton. And just denying the fact that there are physical differences is just denying reality. It's just denying science, and it's just unreasonable. Now, since there wasn't anything actually transphobic about the video itself or about the argument that Rationality Rules was making, Essence of Martyrdom went to his sources. And they actually found something to be outraged about. Rationality Rules referenced a TERF website in his video. What in fact he did was to reference a graph from that website. A graph that, according to biologists who reviewed Rationality Rules' video, is legit. There is nothing wrong with the graph. The information in the graph is accurate. If the website has some pretty shitty rhetoric, has some other shitty stuff, it's irrelevant. The graph is legit. Now, my video about Donald Trump, I reference the Daily Wire. I don't read the Daily Wire. I don't like the Daily Wire. But that particular article was legit. It was a list of Donald Trump's lies. It's a pretty good article. It doesn't mean that I follow the Daily fucking Wire or that I like Ben Shapiro. I don't. No, because Ben Shapiro is a transphobe and I reference his website, apparently, using that same logic, I would be a transphobe by association. If we were going to apply the same that is being applied to Rationality Rules here, it's just pathetic. It's just ridiculous. And that's what I was trying to say when I went on Twitter and started to criticize some people for doing that kind of argument. So I started criticizing Godless Ukrainian, who blocked me after a couple of tweets. Not surprised about that. And then I started to have an argument with Chrisiosity about this stuff. Now, what I was trying to tell Chrisiosity is that she doesn't have an argument. She's not attacking the argument. She's making an appeal to emotion and is just trying to fabricate an accusation of transphobia that just doesn't follow. Now, she took issues on that. Of course she did. And she then just starting to make some other bullshit arguments, like this, for example. And then I, of course, call that out as a fallacy, that it is. It is a strawman fallacy that has nothing to do with the rationality rules' argument. And Kaylin, you might remember her, said it's actually a reductio ad absurdum. It isn't a reductio ad absurdum, and I can show you why. You can do it in a simple syllogism. That is a non sequitur fallacy. That it just doesn't follow. If it doesn't follow, then it was not the same argument. You're just making shit up. And Christiosity was attacking me for using the word fallacies as I don't know, as if I'm Eric Hoven that keeps throwing this word around not knowing what I'm talking about. I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Christiosity. I studied this stuff. I read Aristotle's rhetoric. I've read all of Plato's dialogues. I've read a lot of philosophy in my life. So when I say you are committing a fallacy, I'm not talking shit. You can be sure of that. I know what the fuck I'm talking about. But she dismissed all of that, of course. She doesn't care. She's not interested in listening to criticism. Now, as our disagreements went on, she muted me. She didn't have the honesty to block me like Godless Cranian did. She just muted me. I don't know, maybe it's because of her cis privilege. She's not allowed to block me, I don't know. But yeah, she didn't block me, she just muted me. And when she did, she left this very interesting message. Now, I showed her that what she was doing was fallacies, and she still didn't admit that she was wrong. I showed her that what I was saying about segregation in schools was right. She didn't address that. When I posted another thing criticizing her and Godless Cranian, she just tried to distance herself by saying that why am I making this association with her when it was not something that she said? And then I asked her if she agrees with that or not. She didn't respond. I wasn't muted back then, by the way. She didn't respond. She ignored me. So I find it pretty interesting. I call her on her bullshit, and she just backed off. And then she says that I am not open-minded, that I am not open to criticism. And the most interesting stuff about this is that I am an actual transgender individual. So it's like Christiosity in her virtuous signaling seems that she's just interested in listening to trans people when they agree with her. When they tap her on the back and say, oh, how righteous and how, good ally that she is. But when we criticize her, then we get the mute button. It's just like, I really don't, it baffles me that she cannot see the irony in this situation. It's just so fucking obvious. People like herself are just more interested in being right and proving that they're right. They're not interested in actually advancing a conversation, and that's the whole thing with rationality rules that I really don't get. Like, they want him to be a transphobe. They already decided that he is one, and no matter what he does, he is a transphobe now. And that is what I really don't understand. Like, I don't want people to be transphobes. In his case, he's already proven that he isn't. He made that very clear. His video isn't transphobic in any way. And now they're trying to manufacture some bullshit to make sure that they are right. I don't see how in any way that helps trans people. It doesn't help anyone. And that's what I was calling her and Godless Cranian on their bullshit, because what they are doing is not helping. I am a transgender person, and I am telling them it's not helping. And then they mute me, block me, whatever the fuck else. That's how it is. Anyway, hope you have enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave it a like, a comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I've been Sarah Michel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Cheers.